He was preparing Sunday lunch when my cell phone vibrated. It was a message in the family group chat, that virtual space I myself had created 5 years ago to keep everyone connected. He picked up the phone with my hands still wet from the sink, smiling in anticipation, imagining it would be another funny gag shared by my son, or maybe a new photo of my grandson. But when the screen lit up, what I saw made me freeze. A cold, mechanical, emotionless notification. You have been removed from the Oliveira family group. I blinked several times, as if that could be an application error. He tried to open the group again. Nothing. It had simply disappeared from my list of conversations, as if it had never existed. As if he had never existed. He felt my heart clench inside my chest, a physical pain that started in the center and spread like ice through my arms. My legs buckled, and I had to lean on the kitchen counter. The smell of the chicken roasting in the oven, which moments before filled me with maternal satisfaction, now made me nauseous. He called my son. Once, twice, 3 times. Voicemail. He sent a message, saying, no reply. It was then that I heard the voice of the upstairs neighbor, Mrs. Celia, yelling at her husband. The sound crossed the thin ceiling and reached my silent kitchen. She was complaining about something banal, trivial, but at least she still had someone to argue with, to share her small daily irritations. I was alone, not just at that moment, but in a way I had never allowed myself to admit before. Alone within my own family. 28 years. That was the time I had dedicated to building that family. 28 years since I held my son Rafael in my arms for the first time, still in the maternity ward, feeling that perfect and frightening weight of maternal responsibility. His father had left our lives when Rafa was only 3 years old, leaving behind debts, broken promises, and a 25-year-old woman with a teaching degree who needed to transform into a warrior overnight. I remember as if it were yesterday the smell of that small grocery store where I started working. I would wake up at 4 in the morning to organize the fruits and vegetables before the customers arrived. My son slept in the back room, improvised by the store owner with a kindness that I would never be able to repay adequately. After the grocery store, I would rush to give private tutoring lessons to children in the neighborhood. At night, when Rafa finally slept, I would study for public exams under the dim light of the lamp that flickered in our rented apartment. The walls of that place were so thin that I could hear my son's breathing in the next room, and that sound was the only thing that kept me awake when tiredness threatened to overcome me. For 15 years, my life was a succession of alarm clocks, crowded buses, forced miles, and an unwavering determination to give my son everything he deserved. I passed a public exam to become a teacher in the municipal school system when Rafael was 8 years old. It was the first day he felt we could breathe a little easier. There was no luxury, there never was. But there was stability, there was dignity, and above all, there was love. Every extra penny I earned went to his education, to English classes, to the books he asked for, to the small joys that a single mother can provide when she works 3 shifts. Rafael grew up. He became a good man, educated, with a degree in engineering. He was so proud that I cried on the day of his graduation, holding alone a banner that I had made myself with cheap fabric and a lot of love. He was living proof that my sacrifice had been worth it. Every sleepless night, every meal that I pretended not to be hungry so that I could eat more, every dream of mine that was postponed or abandoned. It all made sense when I saw the man he had become. It was when he met Marina that everything started to change. At first, I was happy. My son deserved to be loved. He deserved to build his own family. Marina was beautiful, well-dressed. She came from an upper-middle-class family. Her father was a doctor. Her mother had never had to work. When she looked at our simple house, at the furniture that I had bought a little over the years, I saw something in her eyes that she tried to disguise. Pity, or maybe disdain. I was never sure. I tried. God knows how hard I tried to be the perfect mother-in-law. I learned to make the sophisticated dishes she liked, researching recipes on the internet, and spending my salary on ingredients that I barely knew how to pronounce. I bought better clothes so as not to embarrass them when we went out together. I offered my help in everything, from organizing the wedding to decorating their new apartment, which Marina's parents had given them as a gift, wedding gift. When my grandson was born, I was there, at the maternity ward, anxiously waiting to meet that baby who represented the continuation of our story. But Marina had other plans. From day one, she set rules. He could only visit my grandson if I was invited. He couldn't show up unannounced, even though he lived only 15 minutes away. He couldn't give gifts without consulting first, because they had a specific pedagogical method and I could confuse the child. He couldn't give my opinion on anything related to raising him, because after all, he was from another generation and things had changed. Each rule was a small blade cutting the connection between me and my grandson, between me and my own son. He swallowed the humiliations in silence. When Marina made subtle comments about my clothes being outdated or my house being too cramped to receive the baby, I smiled and agreed. When she compared her mother to me, saying how Mrs. Sylvia was refined and knew how to behave in any environment, I lowered my head and tried to learn. When my son started treating me with a distant politeness, as if I were an acquaintance and not the woman who had dedicated her entire life to him, I convinced myself that it was just a phase, that soon he would return to being the Rafael who hugged me tightly and said I was his heroine. The family group chat was my idea. He created it 5 years ago so that we could all share photos, schedule lunches, celebrate the small achievements of everyday life. In the beginning, it was active and warm. He shared all photos of Rafael as a child, funny stories of Forrest struggle, good morning messages with flowers and inspiring phrases. But little by little, he realized that my messages went unanswered. When I suggested lunch at my house, Marina always had an excuse. When I sent a photo of my grandson that I had saved with care, no one reacted. The group was becoming a space where I was tolerated, not celebrated. 6 months ago, Marina gave birth to her second son. I was working when I received the news, by message, cold and direct. Pedro was born, 7 pounds. Mother and baby are doing well. No, come meet him. No, we're waiting for you. When I finally managed to visit the hospital, 3 days later, Marina's mother was there, installed in the room, as if it were her second home, holding the baby with ownership while giving orders to the nurses. When I entered, silence fell over the environment like a heavy curtain. Marina looked at me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes and said, "Oh, you came. That's good." There was no warmth in those words. There was only the fulfillment of a social obligation. He held my grandson for exactly 10 minutes before Mrs. Sylvia invented some excuse about the baby needing to nurse and practically snatched the child from my arms. He left that hospital with empty hands and a heavy heart, feeling that there was something deeply wrong, but without the courage to name it. It was then that I began to see the pattern. Marina posted photos on social media with her mother constantly. My second mom, she wrote, the best grandmother in the world. There were images of lunches at Mrs. Sylvia's house, of walks in the park, of elaborate birthday parties where I was never invited. My son appeared in these photos always smiling, integrated into that new family that clearly had no room for me. When I saw those images, a dulak settled in my chest. It wasn't envy, it wasn't envy, it was the pain of erasure, of irrelevance, of becoming invisible to the people you loved above all else. And now I was there, in my kitchen, looking at the notification that removed me from the family group, as if I were a nuisance to be discarded. He opened the app again, trying to understand what had happened. He managed to see, through a mutual contact, that the group still existed. Only now it had another name, the Oliveira Santos family. Santos was Marina's last name, and the administrator was no longer me. It was Mrs. Sylvia. The humiliation burned in my throat like acid. 28 years of sacrifice, of sleepless nights, of postponed dreams, of unconditional love, and I had been replaced as if I were a defective part, a disposable grandmother, an inconvenient mother-in-law, a mother who no longer served her purpose. He sat on the kitchen floor, still holding the cell phone, and let the tears fall. They weren't delicate tears of sadness. They weren't deep sobs of an ancestral pain, the pain of every woman who annihilates herself to build other lives and discovers that her own existence was considered temporary. If you've ever experienced something similar, or know someone who has lived this silent pain, subscribe to the channel to continue receiving true stories of overcoming and starting over. The lunch burned in the oven. The acrid smell of charred food invaded the house, but I didn't move. I stayed there on the cold kitchen floor, hugging my knees like a child, trying to understand where I had gone wrong. Had I been an insufficient mother? Should I have been richer, more sophisticated, more like Miss Sylvia and her life of comforts? Should I have been quieter in the face of Marina's humiliations? Should I have accepted my place as a second-rate grandmother without complaining? It was my neighbor Celia who found me. She smelled something burning and came downstairs to check. When I opened the door, with swollen eyes and a face marked by tears, she didn't ask questions. She simply hugged me. And in that embrace from a woman who barely knew my whole story, I found more solace than I had received from my own family in years. Celia turned off the oven, opened the windows, made tea, and sat with me at the table. That's when I poured everything out. Every humiliation, every venomous comment, disgusted disconcern, every time I was excluded, every moment I felt small and inadequate. She listened to everything in silence, just holding my hand. When I finished, she said something that changed my perspective. My dear, you've spent so much time trying to prove your worth to people who have already decided not to see you, that you forgot to see yourself. Those words echoed within me for days. He had become so small, so silent, so desperate for acceptance, that he had completely lost my own voice. The woman who raised a son alone, who worked 3 shifts, who passed competitive exams, who built a dignified life from nothing, had turned into someone who begged for crumbs of affection from her own family. He spent a week in silence. I didn't call Rafael. I didn't send messages. He didn't try to explain or justify myself. He used that time to look inside myself. At that woman I had forgotten somewhere along the way. He reread old diaries, looked at pictures of when Rafael was little, remembered every battle won, and I realized something fundamental. He didn't need Marina's or Miss Sylvia's validation to know my worth. I was already valuable. He always have been. It was on the 10th day after my removal from the group that I received a call. It was from Miss Sylvia. Her voice was soft, almost maternal, but there was an iron current underneath. Hello there. We need to talk about some things. Marina is very stressed with everything, and we thought it best to establish some clearer boundaries in the family. Nothing personal, you understand. It's for the well-being of the children. He took a deep breath. The old May would have agreed. Apologized for existing, promised to be better. But something had changed. Miss Sylvia. He replied with a calmness that surprised me. He appreciates the call, but I have no interest in discussing boundaries that were imposed without my participation. If my son or my daughter-in-law have something to say to me, I'm here. But I will no longer participate in conversations where I am treated as a problem to be managed. The silence on the other end was deafening. She wasn't used to being confronted. Well, she finally said, her voice colder, I see you're being difficult. Marina was right about you. He hung up the phone. My hands were shaking, but there was a strange feeling of liberation. For the first time in years, I had defended myself. Not with aggression, not with drama, but with dignity, with a clear awareness of my own worth. 2 weeks passed. My son finally called me. His voice was tense, defensive. Mom, what did you say to Sylvia? Marina is very upset. You can't treat her family with disrespect. Her family, I repeated, letting the words hang between us. And me, Rafael, what is my position in your family? You're exaggerating. It was just a WhatsApp group. Why are you making such a big deal out of it? Just a group? My voice came out firmer than I expected. Rafael, you removed me from the space that I created to keep our family united, replaced me with your wife's mother without a word of explanation. When was the last time you visited me? That you called me just to see how I was? That you allowed me to spend quality time with my grandchildren? Mom, you know Marina has her preferences on how to raise the children, and I respect that. But being respectful doesn't mean accepting being invisible. It doesn't mean accepting being treated like an intruder in the life of my own son. For 28 years, he worked 3 shifts to give you everything. He gave up my dreams, my youth, any chance of rebuilding my own love life, all for you, and I'm not demanding gratitude. I never have. But I also won't accept being discarded as if I had no value. You're being unfair to Marina. She's always been nice to you. That left me speechless. Nice. As if being nice was doing the bare minimum socially required, while systematically excluded me from important moments, diminished me with subtle comments, unfavorably compared me to her own mother, and treated me like an inconvenient obligation. Rafael, he finally said, with a deep sadness tinging every word, I'm going to give you the space that you and Marina clearly want. I won't beg for a place in your life anymore. I won't diminish myself in the hope of being accepted. When you decide you want a mother, not an employee who must follow all the rules without question, I'll be here. Until then, take good care of your children. And I hope that one day they won't feel the pain of being discarded by someone they love. I hung up before I could answer. My whole body was shaking. He cried for hours, but among the tears was something new, a sense of self-preservation, a refusal to continue destroying myself for people who had chosen not to see me. The months that followed were the most difficult and the most transformative of my life. I went back to therapy, something I had abandoned years ago due to lack of time and money. My therapist, a woman with keen eyes and difficult questions, helped me understand that I had confused love with self-annihilation. He learned that setting boundaries was not selfishness, but self-respect. Sign was possible, even necessary. He reconnected with old friends that I had neglected during years of total dedication to the family. I went back to taking walks in the park, something I loved in my youth. I enrolled in a painting class, discovering a talent I never knew I had. Little by little, my life stopped revolving around the absence of my family and began to build around my own presence. It was during one of these walks that I ran into Mariana, a former colleague. We talked for hours on the park bench, sharing life stories. When I told her what had happened, she looked at me with an intensity that scared me. "Do you know why Marina pushed you away?" she asked. "Because she's afraid of you." Afraid of me? The idea seemed absurd. Afraid of what you represent. You are living proof that a woman can raise a brilliant child alone, without money, without privileges, host with love and hard work. You are proof that she can never buy or manipulate the kind of true connection you built with Rafael in the first years of his life. So she needed to erase you, replace you, rewrite the family narrative where you are no longer essential. Those words were a revelation. It wasn't about me being insufficient. It was about Marina's deep insecurity, a need for absolute control, an inability to share affection and importance. It wasn't a problem. It never was. 6 months after that day in the kitchen, on my birthday, he received an unexpected visit. It was Rafael, alone, with red eyes. He was standing at my door, holding a bouquet of simple flowers, the same ones I used to buy with my meager money when he was a child. "Can he come in?" His voice was broken. He opened the door, not with the anxiety of before, not with the expectation that he would save me from my loneliness, but with the serenity of someone who had already learned to save herself. We sat at the table, the same old table where we did homework together decades ago. Rafael cried. He cried like he hadn't cried since he was a child. And then he told the truth, that I had already begun to sense. Marina had begun to treat him the same way she treated me, controlling every aspect of his life, making impossible demands, constantly comparing him to her father, diminishing his achievements. When he questioned why I was no longer present, she coldly revealed that she had removed me from the group because your mother was being too inconvenient and suffocating. When he protested, she threatened to make it difficult for him to see his own children. "He was a coward, Mom," he said. His voice choked. "He chose a superficial peace instead of defending you. He chose not to face the conflicts, and with that, I lost you. I lost the only person who has always been unconditionally on my side." He could have used that moment to demand answers, to remind him of every pain, every humiliation. But he looked at my son, at that broken man he still loved deeply, and understood something essential. He was also a victim, although he was a victim who had made the wrong choices. We were all, in some way, victims of toxic patterns that needed to be broken. Rafael, I said, holding his hands, I forgive you, but forgiving doesn't mean forgetting or going back to being who I was. I have changed. I have learned that I need to respect myself first in order to love in a healthy way. If you want to rebuild our relationship, it will be on different bases. With honesty, with mutual respect, with clear boundaries. I accept any condition. I just want my mother back. Then you need to make difficult decisions. You need to talk to Marina, set boundaries in your own home. You need to defend me when I'm not around. You need to accept me when I'm not around. You need to actively choose to have a mother in your life, not just tolerate her when it's convenient. He nodded in agreement, and for the first time in years, he saw real determination in his eyes. Not the empty promise of someone who wants immediate peace, but the determination of someone who finally understood the real cost of his own omissions. The rebuilding was slow. Rafael started couples therapy with Marina. There were difficult conversations, shouting, tears. Marina resisted furiously, but Rafael, for the first time, stood firm. He established that I would be treated with respect, that I would have access to my grandchildren, that my presence was not optional or conditional, but essential. Some things change. Others will probably never change completely. Marina will never love me, and that's okay. I don't need her love. I just need respect and the space to be a grandmother to my grandchildren. Today, when I hold my grandson in my arms and he calls me grandma with that toothless smile, I feel that the pain was worth it. Not because I regained my place in the family, but because I regained my place within myself. I learned that true love never requires you to become invisible. I learned that setting boundaries is an act of self-love, not selfishness. I learned that sometimes the greatest strength is in walking away, in saying no, in refusing to participate in your own diminishment. The scar of being removed from that group still exists. Some nights, when the loneliness squeezes tight, it still hurts. But that scar has taught me that I am much more than the role I play in the lives of others. I am a teacher. I am a friend. I am an amateur artist. I am a caring neighbor. I am a woman of stories and resilience. I am the woman who created a brilliant son from nothing. I am the woman who survived abandonment, poverty, exhaustion, and lovelessness. And I survived not only physically, but with my soul intact, with my capacity to love preserved, with my dignity restored. My story is not about revenge or about proving my worth to those who discarded me. It is about the silent and powerful journey of a woman who learned to value herself when the world insisted on diminishing her. It is about discovering that the greatest revolution we can make is to refuse to be small to fit into the cramped spaces that others build for us. And if there is one lesson I want to leave for all the mothers-in-law, women who feel invisible within their own families, it is this: your worth is not in how much you annul yourself for others. It is in how whole you remain while loving. You can be a devoted mother without ceasing to be a complete person. You can love deeply without losing yourself. You can forgive without accepting being disrespected. You can rebuild bridges without tearing your own soul in the process. Today, I'll look at the family group on my phone, which I am now a part of again, but with a crucial difference. I am no longer an administrator. and I don't need to be. My worth is not in controlling virtual spaces or in being indispensable for family logistics. My worth is simply in existing, in being who I am, with all my imperfections, with all my history of struggles and achievements. And that, I discovered, is more than enough. It is everything.